Both engines died at 36,000 feet. 287 people were falling from the sky. No airport was close enough. No pilot on board was qualified. Except one. She was sitting in row 31. The government had banned her from cockpits for life. The Pentagon made one call. Get her on the line. Now. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The letter was still in her kitchen drawer. She had not thrown it away in 3 years. She did not know why she kept it. Maybe because throwing it away felt like pretending it never happened. But it had happened. Every single word of it had happened, and no amount of pretending would change that. The letter said, Notice of Permanent License Revocation. Pilot Sarah Cole. Certificate number ATL 4471. Effective immediately, you are permanently banned from operating any commercial aircraft. This decision is final and cannot be appealed. Banned from cockpits for life. Those 5 words had taken everything from her. Her career. Her identity. Her marriage. Her savings. Her name. Because when the FAA bans a pilot for life and the news puts your face on every screen in the country, you stop being a person and start being a story. And the story the world told about Sarah Cole was not a good one. She was 39 years old. She had been flying since she was 22. 12 years with the airline. 4 years before that in the United States Air Force, where she had flown in conditions that most commercial pilots never see. She had more than 4,000 hours in the air. She had never had an accident. Not one. Not a single report filed against her in 12 years. And then came Flight 944. It was a routine flight from Chicago to Denver. 149 passengers. Clear weather at departure. Nothing unusual on the pre-flight check. Sarah was in the left seat, captain in command, doing what she had done hundreds of times before. Somewhere over Kansas, both engines on her aircraft surged and failed within 40 seconds of each other. No warning. No gradual loss of power. They simply stopped. Sarah had 14 minutes. 14 minutes to find a place to put a powerless commercial jet carrying 149 people. No runway within range. Just flat farmland, roads, and one dry riverbed that looked wide enough if the approach angle was right. She flew those 14 minutes with everything she had. She chose the riverbed. She flew the approach exactly as her training said to fly it. And in the final 30 seconds, a crosswind she had not fully calculated pushed the aircraft sideways, and the left wing clipped a row of irrigation pipes at the edge of the field, and the plane cartwheeled, and when it stopped moving, 17 people were dead. 132 people walked away. But the world did not remember the 132. The world remembered the 17. The investigation took 4 months. The airline had lawyers in every room. The NTSB had pressure from above that Sarah did not understand at the time. The final report said the crash was caused by pilot error. It said Sarah had miscalculated the crosswind. It said she had chosen the wrong landing site. It said her decision-making under pressure was poor. It said the crash was her fault. The FAA revoked her license the same week. The airline fired her the same day. Her husband left 2 months later. He said he could not live with the phone calls and the angry emails and the strangers who left things on their front porch. Sarah understood. She did not blame him. She blamed herself for most of it anyway. She moved to Seattle. She found a small apartment and a job as a shipping dispatcher where nobody knew her name. She wore plain clothes and kept her hair different and avoided airports and did not watch aviation news. She lived quietly and carefully, like a person who had decided that being invisible was safer than being seen. For 3 years, she lived that way. And then she got a letter from a senator office in Washington, D.C. The letter said new evidence had come forward about Flight 944. It said someone wanted to talk to her. It said she should come to Washington as soon as possible. Sarah read the letter 4 times. She did not let herself feel hope, because hope was a thing that could hurt you. But she bought a plane ticket. Cheapest fare she could find. Window seat, row 31, all the way in the back. She wore a baseball cap pulled low and a plain gray jacket. She just wanted to get to Washington quietly, without anyone recognizing her face. She did not know that before her flight landed, the Pentagon would be searching for her name on the passenger manifest. She did not know that a general would pick up a phone and say 4 words that would change everything. She did not know any of that yet. She just wanted to get to Washington. Atlas Air Flight 2209 departed Seattle at 11 in the morning. 287 passengers. Full flight. The kind of Tuesday that looks like every other Tuesday until it does not. Sarah was in seat 31A. She had her cap down and her earbuds in. The man next to her tried to make conversation twice and gave up after she answered both times with 1 word. She was not trying to be rude. She just could not afford conversation. Conversation led to questions and questions led to her name and her name led to the kind of looks she had spent 3 years trying to avoid. She was looking out the window when it happened. She felt it before she heard it. A deep vibration that moved through the floor of the aircraft and up through the seat and into her back. A wrong vibration. Not turbulence. Not normal engine variation. Something structural and sudden and very bad. Then the sound. 2 heavy mechanical thumps, one after the other, like 2 doors slamming shut inside a factory. And then silence. The kind of silence that should never exist inside a flying aircraft because a flying aircraft always has engine noise, always, without exception, unless something has gone terribly wrong. The cabin went quiet for 1 second. Just one. Then the oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, and the automated voice started speaking, and every passenger on Flight 2209 understood at the same moment that they were in serious trouble. In the cockpit, Captain David Reeves and First Officer Marcus Bell were already working. Reeves was 44 years old, 19 years of commercial flying, calm and methodical under pressure. Bell was 26, second year as a first officer, good instincts, not enough experience for this. Engine 1 is out, Bell said. Confirmed. Engine 2, Reeves said. Engine 2 is out, sir. Reeves picked up the radio. Seattle Center, Atlas 2209, declaring an emergency. Dual engine failure at flight level 360. We need immediate vectors to the nearest suitable airport. The response came back in seconds. Seattle Center was already calculating. The answer was not good. The nearest airport was Denver International. 68 miles away. At their current altitude and without engine power, the aircraft could glide a maximum of 61 miles. 7 miles short. They could not make Denver. They could not make any airport. They were over the Rocky Mountains with no power and no runway within reach and 287 people in the back who did not yet understand exactly how bad this was. Reeves looked at the terrain map. Mountains everywhere. Ridges and peaks and narrow valleys. And then, running through one of those valleys below them, a highway. Route 6. It was not straight. It had curves. But there was one section, about 3 miles long, that looked almost straight. Almost flat. Highway, Bell said. He had seen it too. It has never been done, Reeves said. Not with an aircraft this size. Then we would be the first. Reeves keyed the radio. Seattle Center, we have no airports in range. We are looking at a highway landing on Route 6. We need Colorado State Police to begin clearing the road immediately. And we need any help you can get us. Any help at all. In the control center, Supervisor Janet Flores heard that and understood what it meant. She started making calls. Police. Emergency services. The FAA Operations Center in Washington. And one more call that she had never made before in 22 years of working air traffic control. She called the Pentagon. At the FAA Emergency Operations Center in Washington, D.C., Colonel Ray Hutchins had been on the phone for 6 minutes straight when the passenger manifest for Atlas 2209 came through on his screen. He was already working the problem. No airports in range. Highway option on Route 6. Police being scrambled. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast because the aircraft was descending at nearly 2,000 feet per minute and the clock was not stopping for anyone. He scanned the manifest quickly, the way you scan a page when you are looking for anything useful. Names, rows, occupations if listed. He was not expecting to find anything. He was just being thorough. He almost missed it. Row 31. Seat A, Cole, Sarah. Hutchins stopped moving. His hand stayed on the mouse. His eyes stayed on the name. Around him the room was loud with people on phones and numbers being called out, but Hutchins heard none of it for about 4 seconds. He knew that name. Every person in American aviation knew that name. But Hutchins knew something beyond the public story. Something that had been sitting locked in a classified file for 14 months. Something he had read many times since and never been able to talk about publicly. 14 months ago, a small team of independent engineers had completed a second investigation into the crash of Flight 944. Not the official one. The real one. Conducted quietly, without the airline lawyers in the room, without the political pressure that had shaped the NTSB report. This investigation had access to maintenance records that had not been part of the official review. Records that showed the airline had skipped 2 required engine inspection cycles in the 8 months before Flight 944, because the inspections were expensive and the airline was cutting costs, and they believed, wrongly, that the risk was small. The engines had failed because of undetected fatigue in the turbine blades. Fatigue that the inspections would have found. Fatigue that the airline had chosen not to look for. The Real investigation said the crash of Flight 944 was not caused by pilot error. It was caused by the airline maintenance failure. It said Sarah Cole had done everything correctly in an impossible situation. It said she had saved 132 lives under conditions that would have killed everyone on board if a less skilled pilot had been in that seat. It said the crosswind miscalculation was a minor error under extreme circumstances and that no reasonable standard would hold a pilot responsible for it. It said Sarah Cole had been blamed for a crash she did not cause, so that an airline could avoid criminal liability. Hutchins had read that report 14 months ago. He had wanted to release it immediately. He had been told to wait. There were legal processes. There were proceedings. It was not the right time yet. And now Sarah Cole was in seat 31A of an aircraft falling out of the sky over the Rocky Mountains. He picked up his direct line to the Pentagon. It connected in one ring. General Webb. The voice was sharp and alert. General Patricia Webb ran the Pentagon Aviation Emergency Coordination Desk. She had been briefed on Atlas 2209 40 seconds ago. General, this is Hutchins at FAA Emergency Ops. I have something you need to hear right now. I am listening. The passenger manifest for Atlas 2209. Row 31. Sarah Cole is on that plane. There was a silence. Not a long one. 3 seconds, maybe 4. But in a room full of people talking fast and phones ringing, 3 seconds of silence from General Patricia Webb meant something. The Sarah Cole, she said. It was not a question. Yes, ma'am. You are certain. Her name is on the manifest. Seat 31A. Seattle to Washington, D.C. Another silence. Hutchins could hear the general thinking. He had worked with her for 6 years and he knew the sound of her processing a decision that had no easy answer. Pull her classified file, General Webb said. The real investigation. Not the public report. Open it right now and tell me her flight hours. Hutchins already had it on his screen. 4,212 total hours. 640 on the A321 specifically. Air Force, 4 years. Commercial, 12 years. No incidents, no violations, no reports filed against her in the entire commercial career before Flight 944. And the Route 6 corridor. What does the approach look like? Northeast entry, clear of terrain for the first 2 miles. The straight section is approximately 3 miles long before the road curves. There is a ridge on the western side of the valley that creates wind shear on final approach. That is the danger point. General Webb was quiet for 1 more second. Then her voice came back, and it had a quality that voices get when a decision has been made and there is nothing left to discuss. "Get her on the line," General Webb said. "Get Sarah Cole on the line right now. And get her to that cockpit. Do it in the next 60 seconds. Hutchins was already reaching for the aircraft radio frequency. "Yes, General." "Hutchins." "Ma'am." "The classified report. After this is over, we are releasing it. No more waiting. Is that understood?" "Understood, General." He switched frequencies and started talking. In seat 31A, Sarah was doing math in her head. She had not panicked. She did not panic. That was one thing the investigation report had gotten wrong about her. Panic was loud and wild and useless. What Sarah felt when an aircraft was in danger was the opposite of that. Everything got very clear and very quiet inside her head. It had always been that way. She was calculating altitude versus distance versus glide ratio. She had looked out the window and seen the highway in the valley below. She had already decided that was the only option. She had already worked out the approach in her head, the angle, the speed, the wind correction. She had been doing this in her head for 3 years. She knew this problem. What she did not know was whether anyone would let her solve it. The flight attendant name was Kevin. He was young and scared, but he was doing his job, moving through the cabin, speaking calmly to passengers who were crying or praying or staring at their phones. He stopped when his earpiece crackled. Sarah watched his face change. He looked around the cabin, scanning row numbers. His eyes found row 31. He walked to her fast. "Ma'am. Are you Sarah Cole?" She looked up at him. She had kept her cap down, but she looked up now. "Yes. The FAA Emergency Operations Center is asking for you on the radio. Right now." The man in the seat next to her turned his head. He had been pretending to read since the masks dropped. He looked at her face, really looked, the way people do when a name triggers a memory. His eyes went wide. "Wait," he said. "You are the pilot from Flight 944. The one they blamed for the crash." Sarah stood up before he could finish. Kevin led her to the front galley where the crew radio was. He handed her the handset. She pressed it to her ear. "This is Sarah Cole." The voice on the other end was steady and direct. "Ms. Cole, this is Colonel Ray Hutchins, FAA Emergency Operations. I am going to speak plainly because we have about 12 minutes. General Patricia Webb at the Pentagon has authorized this call. She has read your classified file. The real one, not the public investigation. She knows what actually happened on Flight 944. And right now she needs you in that cockpit." Sarah said nothing. She was listening. The crew up front is good. Reeves is experienced. But they have never done a no-power highway landing, and you have come closer to it than anyone alive. The approach on Route 6 has a wind shear problem off the western ridge. You know about wind shear on final approach in mountain valleys. Sarah closed her eyes for 1 second. Kansas. The irrigation pipes. The crosswind she had not fully calculated. "I know about it," she said. "Then get to that cockpit. The general orders. You have full authorization. Go. She handed the handset back to Kevin. She took off her baseball cap. She put it in the overhead bin. She had been hiding her face for 3 years and she was not hiding it anymore. Take me to the cockpit door, she said. The walk from the front galley to the cockpit door was 30 feet. It took Sarah 2 minutes because of what happened in those 30 feet. The cabin was not calm. People were crying. People were praying. A child somewhere near the middle of the plane was asking his mother the same question over and over in a small frightened voice. A woman in row 8 was on her phone typing a message she hoped someone would read. But as Sarah walked forward, heads began to turn. She was not wearing her cap anymore. Her face was visible. And faces are powerful things. The human brain recognizes faces faster than almost anything else. On that flight there were people who had seen Sarah Cole's face on the news for months, who had read the articles and formed an opinion about who she was and what she had done. That is her, a man said. Not loudly. But loudly enough. That is the pilot from the crash. The one who killed all those people, someone else said. A woman stood up from her seat. Her face was white and her hands were shaking. You are not going to that cockpit, she said. You crashed a plane. You are not flying this one. Sarah stopped. She looked at the woman. She understood the fear. She did not blame her for it. I understand why you are afraid of me, Sarah said. Her voice was level. You read the same story everyone else read. I would feel the same way in your seat. But I need to tell you something true. The engines on this plane failed because of a maintenance problem. The same kind of problem that brought down my plane 3 years ago. I know exactly what happened. I know exactly what to do. And right now I am the only person on this aircraft who has landed a plane with no engine power before. You crashed, the woman said. Her voice broke on the word. Yes, Sarah said. I did. I was 700 feet short because of a wind calculation error. I have had 3 years to understand exactly what I did wrong and exactly how to correct it. That is the only reason the Pentagon just called this aircraft and ordered me to that cockpit. The Pentagon, the man who had spoken first said. Yes. They pulled my real file. Not the public investigation. The one that says the crash was not my fault. The one that says I saved 132 people on a flight that should have killed everyone. She looked around at the faces watching her. I am going to that cockpit. I am going to land this plane. And I am going to bring every one of you home. Nobody stopped her. Kevin knocked on the cockpit door with the emergency code. The lock clicked open. Sarah walked in. Captain David Reeves was a big man with steady hands. He looked back when the door opened and his expression said clearly that he did not have time for interruptions. Then he saw her face. You are Sarah Cole, he said. Yes. The Pentagon called us 30 seconds ago. They said to give you whatever you need. He paused. I read the official report on Flight 944. The official report was wrong, Sarah said simply. She moved forward and looked at the instruments. Her eyes moved fast across the displays, reading altitude, speed, descent rate, heading. 3 years away from a cockpit and it all came back like a language she had never stopped speaking. What is your current altitude and descent rate? 29,000 feet, First Officer Marcus Bell said. He was young and scared and doing his job. Descending 1,800 feet per minute. Best glide speed 220 knots, we are holding it. Good. Glide ratio for this aircraft in clean configuration is 17:1. At 29,000 feet you have approximately 53 miles of glide range. Route 6 straight section is 44 miles from your current position. You have 9 miles of margin. Not a lot but enough if you fly it precisely. Reeves was already looking at the navigation display. The highway. You think we can do it? I know we can do it. I have been thinking about this exact scenario for 3 years. She pointed to the map. Northeast entry into the valley. The straight section begins where the highway crosses the dry creek bed. 3 miles of usable surface. Colorado State Police are clearing it now. What about the wind? Bell asked. Sarah looked at the weather readout. West wind, 24 knots at altitude. She knew what that meant in that valley. She knew it in her body, the way you know things that have cost you something. There is a ridge on the western side of the valley, she said. When you descend below 4,000 feet on final approach, that ridge creates a mechanical wind shear. It pushes the aircraft to the right. Toward the high terrain side of the valley. How do you correct for it? You do not correct for it at the last second. You cannot react fast enough. You anticipate it. You fly the final approach with 3 degrees of left bank already established. When the shear hits, it pushes you right and you end up level and on centerline. If you fly in wings level, the shear rolls you right and you hit the valley wall. Reeves looked at her for a long moment. How do you know this? Because on Flight 944 I flew in wings level. Because I did not know about the ridge effect on that terrain. Because the wind pushed me right and I clipped the irrigation pipes and 17 people died. Her voice did not shake. She had said these words to herself every night for 3 years. They did not break her anymore. I know it because it killed people I was supposed to save. I will not let it happen again. Reeves nodded once. What do you need from us? Bell, I need you on the radio. Give position updates every 30 seconds to ATC and to the state police on the ground. Reeves, I need you on speed and altitude calls. Every 1,000 feet. Keep me honest. She settled into the jump seat behind the center console, close enough to see everything, far enough to let them fly. This is your aircraft. You are the captain. I am going to talk you down every foot of this approach. Every adjustment, every correction, every number. You fly it. I will make sure you fly it right. Reeves put his hand back on the yoke. Let us go, he said. 26,000 feet. 13 minutes to ground contact. Sarah watched the navigation display and talked in a steady quiet voice. She called out small heading corrections, tiny adjustments to the pitch, the precise moment to start the long slow turn that would line them up with the valley. Reeves followed each call without question. He was a good pilot, and good pilots know when to listen. In the cabin, Kevin had made the announcement. Highway landing. Brace position. Remove sharp objects, glasses, and high heels. The cabin had gone from frightened noise to a focused silence, the kind that settles over people when they understand that the time for fear has passed and the time for survival has begun. The man who had said Sarah was the pilot from the crash was now sitting with his hands folded and his eyes closed. The woman who had tried to stop her in the aisle was holding the hand of the stranger next to her. The child who had been asking his mother questions was quiet now, tucked against her side with his seatbelt tight. 20,000 feet. 10 minutes. Wind is shifting, Bell said. Northwest now, 28 knots. Sarah had already seen it. It will increase as we descend into the valley. That is normal for this terrain. Stay on the calculated glide path. Do not chase the wind. Trust the numbers. 15,000 feet. 8 minutes. I can see the highway, Reeves said. Good. Do not look at it too much. Look at your instruments. The highway will be there. Your instruments will tell you if you are where you need to be to reach it. 10,000 feet. 6 minutes. The mountains were close now. Sarah could see them through the windscreen, enormous and sharp and completely indifferent. Rock and snow and empty sky. The valley below was a narrow green corridor and Route 6 was a gray line running through it, and she could see the flashing lights of the police vehicles that had been scrambled to clear it. Flaps 1, Sarah said. Reeves moved the flap lever. The aircraft shuddered as the flaps extended. Speed began to bleed off. Speed 190, Bell called. Good. Hold it there. 8,000 feet. 4 minutes. Gear down, Sarah said. The landing gear came down with a heavy mechanical thud. 3 green lights on the panel. The aircraft slowed further, drag increasing. Speed 175. Good. Flaps 2. 6,000 feet. 3 minutes. The valley was filling the windscreen now. Sarah could see the straight section of Route 6, could see the emergency vehicles parked on the shoulders, could see the clear gray pavement waiting. Flaps full, she said. And now listen to me very carefully. You are about to enter the wind shear zone. It begins at 4,000 feet. You are going to feel the aircraft push to the right. Your instinct will be to correct. Do not correct. Put in 3 degrees of left bank now, before the shear hits, and hold it. Reeves eased the yoke left. The aircraft tilted slightly. From outside it would look wrong, like they were flying crooked. It was exactly right. 4,000 feet. The shear hit. Sarah felt it in the seat, a sudden lateral push, the invisible hand of the mountain wind pressing the aircraft sideways. The nose swung right. The altitude dropped half a beat. And then the 3 degrees of left bank did exactly what Sarah had said it would do. It absorbed the push, and the aircraft came back to center, and they were lined up perfectly with the highway below. It worked, Bell said. His voice had something in it that was not quite belief yet. Keep the bank, Sarah said. Hold it until I say release. 2,000 feet. The highway was right there. She could see the centerline markings. She could see individual emergency workers standing on the shoulder. She could see the mountains on both sides, close, very close. Release the bank. Slowly. Reeves eased the yoke back to center. The wings came level. The aircraft was perfectly aligned. Speed 163. You are on centerline. You are exactly where you need to be. Flare at 50 feet. The moment the main gear touches, brake hard. Do not wait. 1,000 feet. 500 feet. The pavement was rushing up. 50 feet, Bell said. Reeves pulled back on the yoke. The nose rose. The aircraft flared. The main landing gear hit Route 6 like a thunderclap. The tires screamed. Smoke poured from the wheels. The aircraft bounced once, came back down hard, and the nose gear hit the pavement with a sound like a gun going off inside a metal room. Reeves stood on the brakes with everything he had. 160 knots. 140. 120. The deceleration was violent. People in the cabin lurched forward against their seatbelts. The aircraft shook and rattled and filled with the smell of burned rubber. 100 knots. 80. The end of the cleared section was visible ahead. Emergency vehicles parked across the road as a barricade, lights flashing, a gap left in the center. 60 knots. 40. 20. 10. The aircraft rolled to a stop. The nose was 15 feet from the first police vehicle. For 5 seconds, nobody in the cockpit spoke. Reeves had both hands on the yoke, staring at the road in front of him. Bell had his face turned away. His shoulders were shaking. Then Reeves turned around and looked at Sarah Cole. He did not say anything for a moment. There was nothing that needed to be said right then. He just looked at her the way you look at someone who has done something that you understand the full weight of. Then he said, all 287. Sarah nodded. All 287. The evacuation happened fast. Emergency exits opened, slides deployed, Passengers came down onto the highway pavement and were met by paramedics and police officers and firefighters who had been standing in the Colorado mountain air waiting. Nobody had serious injuries. A few people had bumped their heads during the hard touchdown. A woman had a bruised arm from gripping the seat in front of her too hard. A child had cried himself to sleep somewhere in the middle of the descent and woke up on the ground confused and completely fine. 287 people stood on Route 6 in the middle of the Rocky Mountains on a Tuesday afternoon, alive. Sarah was the last one off the aircraft. She came down the rear slide and landed on the highway and stood there for a moment. The mountains were around her on all sides, huge and quiet. The emergency lights were flashing. Somewhere a news helicopter was circling, a distant mechanical sound. The woman who had tried to stop her in the aisle found her first. She walked straight to Sarah and stopped in front of her and looked at her for a long moment. "I am sorry," she said. "I was wrong about you." "You had no reason to trust me," Sarah said. "You heard a story. The story was wrong, but you had no way to know that." "I know now," the woman said. And she hugged Sarah, briefly and tightly, the way people hug each other when they have been through something together that they will never fully explain to anyone who was not there. Then other people came. One by one at first, then in groups. The man from row 12. The family with the child. The couple who had been holding hands in row 19. They came and said thank you or said nothing and just touched her arm or shook her hand. A few of them were still crying. Most of them just looked at her with something in their eyes that Sarah had not seen in 3 years. Not disgust. Not blame. Not the face people make when they recognize a name from a bad story. Something else. Something clean and simple. Gratitude. By evening, the footage was everywhere. 7 different cameras had captured the landing on Route 6. 3 from police dashcams. 2 from passenger phones. 1 from a news helicopter that had scrambled from Denver when the Mayday call went out. 1 from a security camera at a gas station at the edge of the cleared zone. The video of a commercial jet gliding silently through a mountain valley, no engine sound, just wind, and touching down on a 2-lane highway in a clean 3-point landing, was the most watched video in the world within 4 hours. But the more important story came out the next morning. The Pentagon released the classified investigation into Flight 944. All of it. The maintenance records. The internal airline emails. The engineering analysis. The conclusion that Sarah Cole had been blamed for a crash caused entirely by a corporate decision to skip required engine inspections. The Department of Justice announced a criminal investigation into the airline. The FAA announced the immediate reinstatement of Sarah Cole pilot license. The NTSB announced it was reopening the official investigation into Flight 944 and would issue a corrected report. 3 airline executives were asked to surrender their passports. Sarah heard most of this from a hospital bed in Denver, where doctors had insisted she come for observation. She was not injured. She was dehydrated and exhausted, but she was not injured. She watched the Pentagon briefing on the small television in the corner of her room. She watched General Patricia Webb stand at a podium and say that Sarah Cole had demonstrated extraordinary airmanship on 2 separate occasions, that she had been wrongfully blamed for the crash of Flight 944, and that the record would be corrected in full. Sarah watched it without any particular expression on her face. She did not cry. She did not feel triumphant. She felt tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something very heavy for a very long time and finally being allowed to put it down. Her phone was full of messages she had not read. Hundreds of them. She scrolled through without opening most of them. Then she saw one from a number she recognized, a number she had not called in 2 years, and she opened it. It was from her daughter Maya. She was 10 years old. The message said, "Mom, I saw you on the news. My teacher showed the whole class. She said you were brave. I already knew that. Sarah put the phone face down on the hospital blanket and looked at the ceiling for a long time. The criminal trial against the airline executives began 7 months after the Route 6 landing. It was held in a federal courthouse in Chicago, the same city where Flight 944 had departed 3 years earlier. Sarah was called as the first witness. She sat in the witness stand in a gray suit. The courtroom was full. Reporters in every row. Cameras at the back. Families of the 17 people who had died on Flight 944 sitting on the left side of the gallery, some watching her with expressions she could not easily read. The prosecutor asked her to describe the morning of the crash. Sarah described it the way she had described it to herself 10,000 times. The pre-flight check. The normal departure. The engine surge over Kansas. The 14 minutes. The riverbed. The final approach. The crosswind. The impact. She described it without drama and without apology. She said what happened and she said what she did and she said what the result was. She had made an error in her wind calculation. She said so directly. She said it had cost 17 lives and she thought about it every day. She said that was true and would always be true. Then the prosecutor asked her what she had found when she began, on her own, to investigate the maintenance history of the engines that had failed. Sarah explained. She had spent 18 months of her 3 grounded years quietly reading everything she could find about the engine model, the failure mode, the inspection schedule the airline had been required to follow. She had reached out to 2 retired engineers who had worked on that engine type. She had found the gap in the maintenance records. She had found the emails from the cost-cutting meeting. She had taken all of it to the senator office that eventually passed it to the Pentagon. The defense attorney stood up. He said Sarah had a personal interest in finding evidence that would shift blame away from herself. He said her investigation was self-serving. Sarah looked at him calmly. She said, 17 people died on my aircraft. 612 people are alive between Flight 944 and Route 6 because of what I did in those 2 emergencies. I do not need to shift blame. The maintenance records speak for themselves. The emails speak for themselves. I just found them. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge sentenced the lead executive to 11 years. Sarah sat in the gallery for the sentencing and felt nothing dramatic. Just the quiet awareness that something had been completed that needed to be completed. She flew home that afternoon in a small rented plane, north over flat winter farmland, and thought about the 17 names she had memorized long ago. She said them quietly to herself, one by one. She did that sometimes when she flew alone. She did not think it undid anything. She just thought they deserved to be remembered by the person who had tried to save them. The corrected NTSB report on Flight 944 was released 6 weeks after the trial. It was 22 pages long and it said in plain language what the classified investigation had found. The engines had failed due to undetected turbine blade fatigue resulting from 2 skipped maintenance inspection cycles. The pilot had made correct decisions throughout the emergency. The crosswind miscalculation was a minor error under extreme conditions that did not represent poor airmanship by any reasonable standard. The report ended with one sentence that Sarah read several times: Captain Sarah Cole performed her duties with exceptional competence and saved the maximum number of lives possible given the conditions she faced. The original determination of pilot error was incorrect and is hereby rescinded in full. Sarah pilot license came back in the mail in a plain envelope. She opened it at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and read every page. She put it next to the revocation letter, the one she had kept in the drawer for 3 years. She looked at both of them for a while. Then she put the revocation letter in the recycling bin. She kept the new license on the table where she could see it. She started flying again 6 weeks after Route 6. A small general aviation airfield outside Seattle, a single-engine Cessna, early morning before the traffic started. She went up alone on a gray Tuesday and flew north for an hour over Puget Sound and came back and landed and sat in the cockpit after the engine stopped and the propeller went still. She had forgotten how quiet it was after a flight. The particular quality of that silence, the aircraft at rest, everything still. She had forgotten how much she had missed it. She went back the next morning. And the morning after that. The airfield director, a retired cargo pilot named Frank, offered her a job within 2 weeks. Emergency procedures instruction. She accepted. She started Monday. Captain David Reeves gave one interview after the Route 6 landing. He was asked what it was like to have Sarah Cole walk into his cockpit in the middle of a dual-engine failure. He said, "She did not walk in trying to prove something. She walked in because she knew what to do and she had been ready to do it for 3 years. She had spent 3 years going over every second of the first crash and figuring out what she would do differently if it ever happened again. That is not what a person does if they are guilty. That is what a person does if they are innocent and they cannot stop caring about getting it right." Marcus Bell became a flight instructor. In every class he taught on emergency procedures, he began with Route 6. He told his students about the woman in seat 31A who felt the engines die before the warning lights came on. Who walked 60 feet up a terrified aisle to a cockpit she had been banned from for life. Who talked 2 pilots down through a mountain valley in no-power flight and put a commercial jet on a highway with 15 feet to spare. He always ended with the same sentence. The cockpit does not care what anyone wrote about you in a report. It only cares whether you know what to do. Sarah Cole teaches 4 days a week now. She has a small house outside Seattle and a savings account that is slowly becoming something again. She flies her own small plane on weekends. Her daughter Maya comes with her sometimes and asks good questions about instruments and weather and what certain clouds mean, and Sarah answers every one of them completely. On a May morning they flew north over the Cascades and found a break in the clouds and climbed up into clear air above the overcast where the sky was very blue and the clouds below were white and unbroken and the mountain peaks came through like islands. Maya looked out the window for a long time without saying anything. "Mom," she said. "What does it feel like? Flying. What does it actually feel like?" Sarah looked at the horizon. Clear sky, steady altitude, engines running clean. "It feels like being exactly where you are supposed to be," she said. Maya thought about that. Even when it was hard. Even when everything went wrong. "Especially then," Sarah said. They flew north for another hour and then turned back toward home. The engines ran clean the whole way. The sky stayed clear. The landing was smooth and quiet and exactly right. The Pentagon had ordered, "Get her on the line." But Sarah Cole had been ready before the call came. She had been ready every single day for 3 years. Ready and grounded and waiting for the moment when the sky would need her again. The sky always needs the ones who refuse to stop caring about getting it right. She had never stopped.